He's a deviant, and he plays with dark magic. These are facts. And you always see these people who have these meteoric rises. Nobody's giving them, nobody's backing them. They just like they did it from the ground up. And the trade-off with that is you have to perpetuate darkness.
The sentence is already collapsing. Everyone thought the music. Scandal ended the day Sean Combs was locked inside facility, and the courtroom doors finally closed until prison records suddenly start shifting, and the countdown toward freedom begins moving faster. In the past hours, Insider's music point to a quiet update on the Bureau of Prisons system that pushes his release forward to April 25th. Music 2028, more than a month earlier than expected. And the change spreads through the case like a signal that something happened behind music, the scenes. Combs is serving a 50-month sentence after a 7-week federal trial tied to transportation music for paid encounters linked to the so-called freak-offs. Prosecutors demanded more than 11 years. Instead, the mogul sits in a low-security New Jersey facility working in the Chapel Library and enrolled in a program that can erase up to 1 year from a sentence. Yet the timeline keeps shifting anyway. Music, and when a clock starts moving like that, people inside the system usually know exactly music why. I'm happy to go. We think that's just absolutely inconsistent with the jury's verdict. I mean that the jury's verdict was resoundingly clear. There was no trafficking. There was no racketeering. Everything was consensual. Everything was adult, which is why he was convicted only of the offense. What we feel happened today was that the judge acted as a 13th juror, one that we did not choose. And that he second-guessed the official music. Explanation lands fast and clean. Bureau of Prisons records now show Sean Combs' scheduled music for release on April 25th, 2028. More than 5 weeks earlier than the timeline circulating music, only months ago. The entry appears quietly on the federal system database, the same place reporters check for every music inmate whose case attracts attention. For most people inside the prison system, that kind of adjustment barely registers. Music dates move, paperwork updates, administrative credits get applied. But this case never moves quietly. Music Combs arrives at FCI Fort Dix in New Jersey after his sentencing in October. And the calendar around him begins shifting almost immediately. Music first, the release sits at May 8th, 2028. Then it jumps forward to June 4th. Then suddenly it slides backward music, again to April. Each change leaves observers recalculating the math. Music, what looks routine on paper, starts raising eyebrows in the circles following the case. Music, the pattern feels less like bureaucracy and more like a clock that someone keeps adjusting from the inside. We think that a jury verdict should mean more than our jury's verdict seems to mean. And so we are planning to appeal. At the center of that clock sits a sentence that already confuses people who watch the courtroom drama unfold. Prosecutors push for more than 11 years behind federal walls, arguing music, that the pattern of exploitation tied to Combs' private events demands a punishment strong enough to send a message. Instead, the judge hands down 50 months. Even that number carries hidden flexibility. By the time credits for time already served are applied, the effective music stretch shrinks closer to 3 years. A fine of $500,000 lands, alongside 5 years of supervised release. But the prison portion becomes the real focus. During sentencing, the courtroom hears Combs apologize to former partners and associates. He calls his past behavior disgusting, shameful, music, and sick. The line circulates across headlines. In that moment, the narrative music appears simple. A fallen mogul, a public apology, a sentence that still ends his reign. But when the punishment already sits far below music, what federal attorneys demanded, and then the timeline starts shrinking even further inside prison walls. People begin re-examining whether the real consequences ever fully arrived. 2 months, for years, 2 months in prison. Wow, he served a year, he gets some time. He gets 15% credit, so he'd be at 14-ish, 2.5 years. So, and then he gets another 15% in the remaining. He's out in 2 years. Yeah. Should have stuck with the original guess. Inside Fort Music, Dix, the official version paints a picture of a man trying to rebuild himself. Combs reportedly works in the prison chapel library, cataloging books and assisting Music with administrative tasks. His legal team specifically pushes for this facility during the sentencing phase because it offers proximity music to family and access to rehabilitation programs. One program in particular draws attention, RDAP, Music, the Residential Substance Abuse Program. In federal facilities, completing that program can remove up to 1 year from a sentence. Lawyers across the country know this system Music well. It is one of the most common ways inmates shorten time without appealing their convictions. Music, according to statements released through representatives. Combs spends his days reading, writing, exercising. Music and participating in counseling sessions tied to sobriety and personal accountability. Music, the message presented to the public feels straightforward. Prison changes people. Music, supporters circulate the same line repeatedly, insisting that the environment has forced reflection. On music paper, it fits the narrative of rehabilitation the system likes to promote. A Diddy obviously just starting out his time, well, not just starting out, but starting out his official sentence since being sentenced not too long ago. And I think suffice to say it's not going well so far. Yeah, clears throat no, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's got 4 years and change that he's going to ultimately have to serve. Although he has served already a year as he awaited his trial, and then went through his trial. But the story bends the moment other voices from inside Fort Dix Music start speaking. A report surfaces claiming Combs is caught with a fermented mixture brewed from Fanta, sugar and apples, a homemade drink that circulates inside federal facilities when inmates Music experiment with kitchen supplies. Sources say prison staff initially consider moving him to another unit as punishment before reversing the decision. The incident draws attention because of what Combs tells the court Music, only weeks earlier, that he is sober for the first time in 25 years. In a letter to the judge, he writes Music that the old version of himself ended inside a jail cell. The old me faded in jail, and a new version of me was reborn. The sentence spreads Music widely, a carefully crafted symbol of transformation. Then the rumor about the fermented mixture appears and quietly complicates that image. Music, inside prison systems, contradictions travel faster than official statements. Music guards hear them, inmates repeat them. And observers on the outside begin wondering Music, whether redemption narrative is something being built deliberately for public consumption. Another voice emerges from someone who recently leaves the same facility. Former NBA player Sebastian Telfair completes his own federal sentence and walks out of Fort Dix speaking openly about what he sees. Music, according to Telfair, Combs appears comfortable behind the walls. He says the mogul is holding Music, it down and staying in good spirits while navigating prison life. The phrase spreads through entertainment outlets, adding yet another layer to the picture. On one hand, supporters interpret it as resilience. On the other, critics hear something different. A reminder that the man who once hosted extravagant parties and commanded entire rooms still carries Music, influence even inside a federal institution. Telfair also comments on the dramatic shift from a rock star life built Music, around late nights and excess, to the slower rhythm of incarceration. The implication is that the experience Music forces self-reflection. Yet the tone of the interview never suggests someone Music, broken by consequences. Instead, it sounds like someone adjusting to a new environment, Music, adapting quickly, learning how the system operates. That adaptability is where the conversation begins turning Music sharper. Federal prisons run on incentives, good behavior earns credits. Participation in programs opens doors to earlier Music release dates. In some cases, cooperation with investigators creates opportunities that never appear on public paperwork. Music, none of those possibilities appear explicitly attached to the updated release date on the Bureau of Prisons music system. It simply changes. But people familiar with high-profile federal cases start asking the same quiet question. Music, what else is happening around this sentence that the public cannot see yet? During the trial, prosecutors describe a network of events tied to so-called freak-offs, gatherings involving partners, performers, and elaborate arrangements that investigators argue move beyond private behavior into criminal territory. Witness testimony introduces descriptions of coercion, control, and violent outbursts. Those claims become the backbone of the prosecution's argument for a decade-long punishment. When that requested sentence collapses into 50 months and the calendar inside prison music continues shifting downward, the gap between expectation and reality starts feeling too large to ignore. Thing is, all of those things that you just said are also included in the racketeering count. So we don't know what the vote is. You music, hard to RIA.